So I was not in good shape in 2012. I think
Okay.
as we left it off. I went to the Mayo Clinic because I was getting significant pain issues, significant muscular deficits, and coming back with the idiot's diagnosis. I was kind of at a loss, and that's when I met Dr. Gant, and I started to do more functional things, and where I learned, so I was able to do functional things about it. I added in methylated B vitamins into my diet. I was able to add in all sorts of other supplements that go along with that B vitamin supplementation, and I was able to, I think, functionally stop the progression of this disease, or at least slow it down.
Welcome to Ultra Life. Today we have a very fascinating person that we call a friend. Her name is Mary Jane Fry. Some of you, if you've never gone back into our archives and listened to any of the podcasts we've done with her, you are really going to enjoy it. I am one of your hosts. I'm Josh Bellew.
I'm Adam Payne, the other host, and you're all right, Josh. Mary Jane, you are a friend.
Thank you.
I feel like there should be some corny song we get playing right now, but it's true. There are people that you get to know, and you appreciate them professionally, and there's people that you'd actually want to hang out with, and I really want to say you're one of those people.
Well, I tell people all the time, my friends at Ultra Botanica.
Oh,
So
there we go. I guess
Right.
it's done then.
We appreciate that. So, Mary Jane, there's people that haven't viewed you before and listened to you. And so I would love it if you would, rather than me trying to tell your story, I would rather you take a couple of 3 minutes and give a little journey of your educational background, why you're doing what you're doing now, and then we'll get into the fun stuff later about things you are learning and things that people need to know to be able to get to the root cause of those mystery illnesses. So,
well, I am a pharmacist. I was educated in the early 80s at Weatherford. I loved pharmacy. I still love pharmacy, but I've shifted from the traditional realm of pharmacy into a consulting world of pharmacy with functional integrative medicine as my base. Like you said, the root cause. I think it kind of just evolved over years. Started with our compounding pharmacy going to some seminars and learning about
that's right.
hormone
You had a light bulb
replacement.
moment in the bioidentical hormone world, right?
Right,
That was kind of the
right.
first part of your path.
It was the hormone replacement therapy, and then as the years went on, whenever we went to a seminar, they would say, well, we taught you about hormones. Now you need to look at thyroid. Now you need to look at adrenals, your energy, your fatigue. Now you have to look at what's going on in your gut. And now my latest place that I put things into is trying to piece the genetics into
Right.
that
So-
and weave it into everything else.
I got to ask you, because I'm really interested, who was sponsoring these seminars that you were going to? Was it some of the diagnostic testing companies that you now represent?
It's been, I don't consider myself representing anybody
No,
specifically,
right.
but
You utilize some of their
utilize,
tools.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
They're in your toolbox.
so first off was the Pharmacy Compounding Association. That was a number one place that we learned about the hormone replacement therapies. There was a seminar that I went to early on that was from the American College of Apothecaries. And so that was another place. And then ZRT is a saliva blood test company.
Right.
And now they do urine strips also. So that company did some seminars in the past. And then nutritionally wise, I've been at seminars from all of the big functional medicine type nutritional companies, Zymogen, Metagenics, Orthomolecular, the other place was A4M.
Right.
Did
Right.
some training with them, some seminars.
Are-
So lots of different places.
Are most pharmacists or compounding pharmacists open to this world? I have found that most compounding pharmacists I know far more than pharmacists that don't do any compounding. Is there any reason that your group was so open to pursuing these things?
The owner of the pharmacy originally, Don Cootie, he was a pharmacist for years and years, and he took an interest in nutraceuticals.
Nice.
And brought in somebody back in the early 90s and trained us in some basics. And then from there, it just kind of kept growing. I think the reason that the compounding pharmacies were getting into it was the niches, that we could be able to be involved in. You weren't just making a compound, but you actually understood what was going on.
Right.
And then also early on, there weren't very many practitioners who were involved in it. So the practitioners were sending us the patients.
So Adam, and you running into pharmacists and all kinds of researchers that you've run into over the years, what is the tipping point for some of them? I mean, we've always talked about these personal crises, but how do people like your work out at OU, these researchers begin to get interested in plant bioactive compounds and nutraceuticals and things like that?
Well, it typically doesn't come from the pharmacy backwards. It usually comes from a researcher that is understanding either the basic research, which we've done an incredible job. Our hats off to the NIH for investing, I think, a couple of $1 trillion now into basic research to understand how our biology works from a fundamental basis. Even like the whole human genome project was a dream of, I don't know, was it the Carter administration when that started?
Wow.
And they we're going to sequence the whole human genome, and it was like one pair at a time, and then we could do lots more, and then the technology is now that we can now sequence a whole human genome in a couple of hours.
It's
right?
amazing
What we can do, but it's the research drove insights into human biology, and then there were all of these anecdotal pieces of evidence that were out in the natural medicine space that drove connections. So, a friend of ours, a guy named, he's the retired Mike Steffen.
Oh,
Mike's
there you
the
go.
retired
Yep.
orthodontist. Have you met him?
No, I haven't.
Oh, he's a really interesting guy. His pet hobby was understanding nutritional supplements, because his whole thing was, we are living in an era when, for the first time in human history, we have access to concentrated bioactive plant compounds, vitamins, minerals, nutritional substances in a concentrated form. So now we can selectively and effectively dose the human body with these concentrated substances that heretofore have just been available in the food that we eat. But now we can concentrate them and provide them as supplementation.
I say tongue in cheek, and Mike will appreciate this because you and I know how many supplements he takes, and he's in shape. So I think a good percentage of his poundage is just the amount of capsules he takes on a daily basis.
Mary Jane.
No, you got to hear this, Mary Jane. You're going to love this.
I kid you not. When we met him, he was taking over 100 different supplements on a daily basis. Seriously, it was like
a walking veg cap.
Yeah.
And he was
Yeah,
healthy.
that's crazy.
Yeah,
He was healthy.
Indeed.
But it was interesting the way he actually came to us, because he said, I have to tell you a story. He said, Adam, I have changed one thing in my life in the last 6 months, and that was I added UltraCur Pro to my regimen. And I need to tell you a story because I could never remember the names of my parents, or my patients. And it was always befuddling to me. I'd have to look at the chart and say, okay, this is little Jimmy that's in here, and his parents are Amy, and da-da-da-da. And so he would refresh himself. He said after taking UltraCur Pro, he could not only remember the name of his patient, he knew their parents' names, He can remember the dog that they have. He'd walk in and say, hi, Jimmy and Mary and Ann and la da 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 da. And he said reflectively, the only thing he changed is UltraCure Pro. He was convinced that this was like the
That's
newest
awesome.
thing in memory.
Well,
Yeah.
just last week when I was listening to that memory summit,
Yeah.
there were some of them talking about the curcumin.
Really?
So,
Somehow clearing up the connections, or what were they saying?
well, it was just really brief, but it had to do with the inflammation.
Oh, interesting.
So I think that's interesting. I think when you ask the question about where is the trigger, the starting point, Mark Hyman, I know he had a health issue. So many different.
Yeah.
Sarah Gottfield had a
We've
issue,
just seen that
just
over
and over
during our interviews. With
Right,
people.
and mine
A
probably,
crisis.
mine was probably my premature son and my mother aging
Oh, wow.
at the same time, and me trying to put together, what I could do for both
Wow,
of
you're
them.
like super mom to do both of those things at the same time.
Well, you
That's
you
tough.
live with the cards that you're dealt, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
don't
You
get to
do.
choose.
Yeah, that's right.
Well,
that's
God
right.
gives us
Yeah,
things
absolutely.
that make a difference in our lives.
And grace to overcome in the moment, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, grace to overcome in the moment. So, is there anything that you have been doing lately? And I know and we probably need to revisit just for a little bit your move into utilizing genetics. We were talking off camera just before this started, and you were saying, there's a reason that I do this, and I do it because there's these categories of things that I learn. So help people understand, and the name of the test that you prefer, because you've done some research, you like the people, you like the solid science of what they put together, and continue to evolve that. Tell us a little bit about that again.
3x4 genetics, so it's 3x4 genetics is how you type it in. They take a pathway-driven approach. And what that means is instead of looking at just MTHFR or looking
Okay,
at
hold the phone. For those of you that don't know, Mary Jane is going to tell you what the MTHFR gene is.
it's a methylfolate reductase gene.
Okay.
So what that is part of our methylation pathway, which has to do with how we process our DNA, how we process our B vitamins
Okay.
and other nutrients for supporting our DNA, supporting mood, heart, all different parts of our systems.
So for a second, because we've never talked really about methylation, I don't believe, with any of these podcasts, Adam, you have a really personal thing about that. And then I'd love Mary Jane to come along and tell us a few
a
things she
personal thing?
learns. It is a personal thing, right?
Well, I mean, it's
so you had an issue, and you didn't know what it was, right?
A small issue. So we were talking about Charlie Gant, remember, a little bit earlier,
Yes.
right? He actually, I did my first genome scan using Ancestry.com, and when he was still alive, Dr. Gant took me under his wing, and he threw my genome into a tool that he had.
I thought you were going to say under the bus.
I did. Oh, yeah, you're doomed. Just go sit in a corner and die. No, he threw it into this tool that essentially mapped out which genes are recessive, which are
Right.
similar to the 3x4, but a lot less elegant. It was it spat out like a 20-page report that was color-coded, similar to to that. And he had 12 genes that were related to the MTHFR, and I was red in all of them. I am literally recessive on every single MTHFR gene.
Now, how did that affect the way you feel, Adam? Because I know
I feel
Mary
great
Jane's
about
gonna,
that.
Well, no. Okay, I'll take off my psychiatry hat now, and I'll put on my commentator hat again. How did that manifest in your body?
Oh,
with those
well, I mean,
being
it's
recessive.
not only that, but I'm also recessive in all the B vitamins, which are really interesting. So I don't recycle B vitamins. I slowly turn them into energy. So my mitochondria have a hell of a time creating energy in my body. But it's resulted in significant motor neuron deficits in my legs. and in my peripheral nerves, where it manifests itself in functional loss. Josh is the short answer of it, but it also provided insight into where I could functionally supplement myself and find some not just relief, but the ability to slow down the progression. So in 2012, I went to the Mayo Clinic, and they said that I had something called, I was an idiot. No, idiopathic.
Idiopathic.
Yeah, and I have an idiot's disease. It's called idiopathy. No, idiopathic peripheral neuropathy, which is a shorthand for you have peripheral neuropathy and we have no idea where it's coming from.
Okay, this is a great time for us to segue into another segment here. Now, we will be right back with Mary Jane Fry, pharmacist, very interesting woman that does some neat things. One thing I love about her is she's always learning. So this is Ultra Life Today. I'm Josh Bellew.
I'm Adam Payne.
We'll be right back.
Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Ultra Life Today. We've got our very special guest, Mary Jane Fry, with us. We've been going down a path of genetics, talking about the MTHFR gene. Adam has been sharing that he's recessive there and in a number of other areas. And we are back. That was not a backhand insult.
You're bashing me today.
I am trying to elevate the.
I
am trying to elevate the knowledge
But
of our
let me
audience.
say this. So I was not in good shape in 2012. I think as we left it off. I went to the Mayo Clinic because I was getting significant pain issues, significant muscular deficits, and coming back with the idiot's diagnosis. I was kind of at a loss, and that's when I met Dr. Gant, and I started to do more functional things. And where I learned, so I was able to do functional things about it. I added in methylated B vitamins into my diet. I was able to add in all sorts of other supplements that go along with that B vitamin supplementation, and I was able to, I think, functionally stop the progression of this disease, or at least slow it down.
And your body is now rejecting these is now accepting these nutrients that you're putting into it, whereas before you could have been taking big handfuls of supplements, and it just wasn't going to work, right?
And that's the rub. I mean, you could have measured B vitamins in my blood, and it looks like you have.
They look high a lot of times.
Yeah.
Actually, when you
Oh,
don't
that makes
process your
sense.
B12 well,
That makes sense, kind of.
the B12 level will look high, and they'll say, "Oh, you have to stop." And it's like, no, let's look at what's actually happening, because if it doesn't process through the methylation system, it's just sitting there in the serum, and that's all they look at. So now we look at different places to be able to see the nutrients so that we know that they're getting to the system.
So
You
you
know,
learn. Go ahead,
Brian Frank actually did a really interesting
So
test where they
many
take.
doctors to
I
keep
know,
up with.
I know, it's terrible. So many doctors. He took cell samples from my mouth, and they actually cultured those cells and looked at functional outputs of when you provided nutrients to those cells, how they actually process those,
that's
those
cool.
nutrients.
Oh, no, I haven't heard of that.
Yeah, so I got some insight from that, and it's just absolutely amazing the number of ways that we can look at functionally how our bodies are operating in order to provide insight into what we could be doing to remediate what's going on if there is a deficit.
Right.
So you do this 3x4 genetic test. I said that right? That's what
Yep.
it's called? Okay.
Yep.
And you find some people, because I know you've done a lot of this, you find some people that you realize are not methylating B vitamins. Tell me how that affects behavior, mood, cognitive ability, other things in a person's life. Because a lot of people are just like, I just take my daily multivitamin and I don't care if it's synthetic or whatever, it's just supposed to do it kind of thing. But obviously a lot of people aren't getting out of their supplements what they need to. So you're unlocking a door where they can. What happens with an individual that's deficient in B vitamins and can't methylate them?
So there's lots of different things that can be their symptom that throws them into trying to figure it out. It can be headaches, it can be infertility, it can be depression, it can be
Wow.
cardiovascular. So there's a lot going on. The one thing that early on when they were just looking at that methylation MTHFR, they were over methylating sometimes because some people are heterozygous, which means they got the gene from one parent,
Right.
and sometimes they're homozygous, which means they got it from both parents.
Okay.
And when it comes to methylation, their higher propensity towards risk is when it's homozygous. So if somebody were heterozygous at the beginning, and there's two different ones actually, there's two different MTHFRs. So if you were heterozygous in one and you were homozygous negative per se, it's not the right term, but you were in I'm not
The danger
explaining
zone of
this right.
deficiency?
Well, you can be homozygous and not have any effect at all, and you can be homozygous and it have high impact of risk.
Okay.
That's the way to say it. So some people early on were finding out that they were heterozygous in one of the two gene SNPs, and they were getting put on high doses of methylfolate.
Okay.
But now, because of the way we get pathways, not everybody is like Adam and has 11 different methylation SNPs that are off. But so we can look at those methylation pieces and tell whether somebody has a little need for methylfolate or if they have a high need for methylfolate. If they have a need for B12 or if they have a need for choline, if they have a need for other nutrients. So it's not always about methylfolate now. There's other pieces to how methylation occurs in our system.
When you mention headaches, I know I continually run into people that have migraines that take them out for 2 days sometimes. Is that the kind of headache? I mean, could it actually manifest into a migraine when you are not?
If you don't methylate properly, absolutely.
Wow.
Because methylation is part of our detoxing system also.
So
You don't always know where else you're going. Headaches can be hormonal, headaches can be toxins, headaches can be inflammation. So there's lots of different places. But in 3x4, we can look at each pathway, look at all of the SNPs in that pathway, and be able to tell potentially, it's all risk potentials of what's going on. You also throw in the lifestyle, the diet, and some people will have a high propensity towards something and it not exhibit itself in them because they've already done the lifestyle, they've done
got
the
the
diet.
exercise going on. They've
So-
got
Right.
the clean living.
But
going on,
Exactly.
the
let's
clean eating.
set a foundation here, though, because most people are going through life absolutely naive as to their genetic makeup. Absolutely naive.
Absolutely.
Right, and they don't know what to take. They go to maybe they'll have a functional doc that'll say, "Hey, we need to do some testing." Not all functional docs, or even not everybody that comes into your clinic or into your store gets tested, right? But it's typically driven by some sort of manifestation of disease or an issue that starts the whole thing, right? So
That's true, but hopefully over the years, as the price comes down, we will start with genetics. I was talking to a woman the other day, and I said, we really should be checking your grandchild.
Absolutely. I mean, this
Because-
is the point I was getting
Yes.
to, is that we should be starting life with a genetic kind of roadmap, saying, hey, for this person, these are going to be the kinds of nutritional biochemical challenges that they are going to be facing, and let's imprint some lifestyle issues now that will help that person. It's like you steer the ship a little bit now, you can be in an entirely different place, 20 years down the line.
I've seen so many people who are gluten sensitive.
Oh my gosh.
And
Talk about a
when-
transformation.
When you see the changes when the test shows up. So the genetic testing is not specifically for just gluten sensitivity. It's a test in our profile, the blueprint, the 3x4, that actually is looking at a risk of celiac disease. So if somebody has the combination of SNPs that go together in that pathway, the risk for celiac disease can be 75%.
Wow.
So that's the highest risk. But there's other combinations of the SNPs and alleles that would put them into potentially just being sensitive to gluten. And so there's different ways to see that. I had a friend whose granddaughter was 3 or 4 years old, super pale, always having stomach trouble, and finally somebody tested her for celiac. And within a month, her entire structure, features, everything had
Demeanor,
changed.
everything changed.
Everything had
So
changed.
I mean, just a recent thing in my life. My wife, constant problems, headaches, sleep cycles that were all out of whack all the time. She finally figured out, after working with Dr. Wyndham, that she was sensitive to gluten. And she was, she struggled with it. She's like, oh my gosh, everything I love is gluten.
Right.
And she bit the bullet, and she's eliminated from her life. And it's like, I'm meeting a whole new person.
It's amazing what it can do.
It is magical, isn't it?
I'm grateful.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So other places in the pathways, there's a histamine pathway.
Oh yeah.
So you can have external allergies like you're dealing with, or you can have allergies that have to do with foods that raise histamine levels. But we found that there's probiotics that lower histamine levels in the system. There's foods that lower histamines in the system. There's an enzyme that can lower histamine in the system. So by seeing that, we can find different ways. And histamines in the typical world, we just think of antihistamines. You have an allergy, you know what that allergy is, you stay away from it. But in reality, it can be headaches, it can be hormone issues, it can be sleep issues. High histamine can be a sleep trigger or a lack of sleep trigger. So histamine is another whole world that has been opened up.
And just so our viewers understand, you've walked down this thing where you mentioned things like headaches and migraines, and that could be because they're not methylating B vitamins. You mentioned gluten and celiac disease, and if you've ever been around a person, like Adam says, that truly didn't know and then they changed their diet, their mental health, everything changes. It happens so quickly. It's just mind-boggling. Sleep cycles like that. And then you mentioned histamine. I want everybody to recognize you're learning all this just from this one test, the 3x4, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
It's,
And I know there's some other categories, so please.
so it's
continue.
risk potentials always. So we're
Okay.
not going to say you are celiac.
Right.
You know, it's a risk potential for celiac, or you are going to have an issue with histamine because you might have eliminated those foods already and not be.
Right.
So everything is a risk potential. So the main 4 cellular pathways are detoxification, inflammation, methylation, and oxidative stress. So one of my stories is I've had my left foot has peeled for 20 years,
Wow.
maybe even 25 years now. Right foot, no peeling. Left foot, constantly peeling. And when I did my genetics, I found out that I don't have all of the proper processes when it comes to glutathione. And glutathione's a major
Master antioxidant.
master antioxidant, master detoxifier. So in being able to add a couple of supplements, my foot is so much better. But it's cleared, some of those toxins or whatever's going on through the left side of your body. Years ago, a doc had told me, well, it's the left side of your body, so it has to do with detoxification.
What? Why? Why does the
Because
left side
our
have to do detoxification?
This woman, she actually had like 3 or 4 different degrees, and she said our left side of our body is how we detox things out of our system.
Wow.
So
I would love to know why that is.
I don't know.
Mary Jane's going to find out for you,
Well.
and we'll talk about it next time, right?
We'll look it up.
So, I mean, have you clinically seen this and as you've gone through life?
Well, because I've only done the genetics like 2 years ago, but I'm making progress.
Yeah, but in other
With
people.
Every once in a while, somebody will tell me that their left foot has what they think is a toe fungus when it's not probably a toe fungus. It's probably
Something, a
something else.
detoxification, yeah, maybe.
So, Mary Jane, with just a couple of minutes left before this next break, when you mentioned your inability to process glutathione, and then you said you took a couple of supplements, Adam and I do not mind if people talk about other supplements on our broadcast.
Yeah, we don't
we
mind.
have a special niche with a couple of things that we do, and we do it really, really well here. But I'm very curious because there's people out there probably taking glutathione thinking it's doing great for them. What were the cofactors that helped your body begin to be able to process glutathione?
so sulforaphane
Okay, sulforaphane, nice.
right
Okay.
is one of those products.
Interesting.
But sulforaphane is, I don't know that I'm saying that right.
It's
Yeah,
sulforaphane, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's basically like a precursor, right?
It's the
To
glucoraphanin.
Right,
elevate.
it's the glucoraphanin,
Yes.
but you have to have myrosinase with it, which is the enzyme that breaks it down. So it comes from broccoli, but
Okay.
there's different ways to get it. And some people will say, I'm taking this product, and if it doesn't have the right way to process it within the product, or
Right.
you don't have the myrosinase in your system at that moment, then you don't get as much of a benefit.
Where does myrosinase come from, and how do people end up supplementing with it?
Well, there are companies, and I've listened to people talk about them, but I haven't ever used them. But there are products that they say if it's the broccoli sprout and it's the raw powder, then you're going to get the myrosinase with it.
Okay.
So that's what some people, they hold their hat on that. Zymogen has come up with a combination of the sulforaphane with myrosinase. They've sourced
Okay.
the actual myrosinase, put it together, and that's what I'm taking right now.
Okay.
Interesting.
Clever idea. Okay. Well, this is Ultra Life Today. I'm one of your hosts, Josh Bellew.
I'm Adam Payne, and we've been having a discussion with Mary Jane Fry. Next week, we'll be returning to our discussion and continuing on the fascinating journey. Stay tuned.